Hello and welcome to FDS. My name is Nate and I'm your host. Today we are going to be talking about the Craftsman 10 compartment organizer. Some of you may be familiar with the Stanley or Dewalt version, depending on what part of the country you're in or world, that is very popular among Magic the Gathering players and other trading card game players as well. For those of you who are not familiar, it is a organizer for tools and fasteners and things, hardware, that Stanley Dewalt make that just so happens to fit Magic cards very well. A couple of years ago, a very popular Magic the Gathering content creator, you all know who I mean, made a video on this container, and I went right out to try and get one, and they were sold out. And I went on Amazon, and they were sold out. And the few times that they were available for way more than MSRP. The MSRP is around $20 for these things, at least it was at the time. And it was double that price on Amazon whenever there was one available. Well, when I went to my local hardware big box store, I found one that was similar, yet a very different shade. This is the one I found. This is essentially Craftsman's version of the Stanley Dewalt organizer. It is very similar, and it works for me. I will say right up front, this will not be a compare and contrast because I haven't been able to get a hold of one of the Stanley Dewalt versions of this, so I only am familiar with this. Hi, popping in here real quick to admit that there has been a change. I had not realized that the Stanley Dewalt version of this 10 compartment organizer had changed to be much more like the Craftsman now. The compartments of the new Dewalt Stanley are chamfered, and actually they look exactly the same, except the difference is they are yellow. I can say that when the professor at the Tulare Community College reviewed the version of this 3 or so years ago, again, link to that video in the description down below, the version he reviewed, the compartments were flat square, so they fit the cards perfectly. I'm actually a little disappointed that Stanley made this change. I will also note that Stanley Black & Decker, that owns the Dewalt brand, as well as Craftsman, they now own Craftsman. That's a change since the professor's video a couple of years ago as well. So maybe they saw the design in the Craftsman one and liked it better and just changed it. I don't know, but I was not aware of this. So yeah, now we know. First off, I want to cover what I like about this thing. It can carry a lot of cards, and it's very sturdy. And if you use the enclosed containers that come with it, your cards aren't going anywhere. There is some looseness. They will bang around a little bit, so you do want to be careful about that. Overall, I think it works fine. It also can fit deck boxes fairly well. These also are stackable. These use the Craftsman Versa Stack, which basically means that you can put another one on top and then click this little clip thingy here, and it will attach the other one, and then now you have two that essentially are connected together. They do seat within each other, so that makes them easy to stack on shelves. They have sturdy metal clasps that I'll admit are a little finicky, and definitely this is a toolbox type thing, so you do have to get used to that. One thing about this is the lid. When it opens at 90 degrees and then stops. This can be a benefit or a negative depending on how you look at it. It's a negative in the sense that if your thing gets bumped at all while you're working on it, it's going to fall on you. But it actually can be a bit of a positive, because if you're at an event or at a game store or even at a friend's house and you open it up, it's pretty much held there as long as you don't jostle it around too much, and the lid won't fall back, which is kind of nice. So it's not taking up double the space just because the lid can't be held up in some way. You'll notice that the edges of the lid have a gasket with some material in it. I believe this is for a level of waterproofing, so that way the tools and fasteners and items that get put in here, or typically this was designed to have put in here, won't get wet and rusty and that sort of thing. Maybe some of the users are probably just going to stick something in here and stick it on a shelf for half a year, so it's probably a good idea to keep it somewhat waterproof. That being said, I wouldn't necessarily dunk this in a pool of water hoping that your cards won't get wet, but it's a nice little benefit there that I like. Also, you'll notice that the lids have a grid system on it that the cups inside get locked into when the lid is shut. That way, if you have one container in the middle, you pick it up, it mostly will stay there. This comes with 2 sizes of internal compartments. Well, technically 3, but I'll get to the third one later. It has this size and this size. It typically comes with 4 of these and 2 of these. You may hear this one's jingling. That's because it actually has nails in it. I have a couple of these that I use for their intended purpose, because they're cheap. The larger ones fit about 125 double-sleeved cards, technically. They actually can hold a lot more, but I'll get to why I wouldn't put more than 125 in the big ones here in a moment. The smaller ones can hold about 50 to 75. Again, technically more, wouldn't risk it. But they fit boulders. The 60 or the 40 plus can fit in the smaller ones, but the 80 or 100 plus will not fit in the smaller containers. But the 80, 60, and 40 plus can fit in these as well. Or conversely, you can just put these directly in the main container as well. The 80 pluses actually fit in the footprint of these small containers fairly well. These cannot stand in there. They have to be on their sides. So you can put them on their backs or on their sides and they'll fit quite well. They will kind of roll around a little bit in there, but these are boulders. It's fine. Or if you really want to, you can pack them in really tight and they won't go anywhere. I mentioned there was a third compartment type, and that would be this. This is along the sides. There's one on each side, and I would imagine this is for longer tools, maybe longer fasteners, zip ties, something like that. This is something for something long and thin. I use them for D20s, spin downs, or other dice. You also can fit pens and stuff like that in here. But yeah, so you get two of these, so you can fit a lot of spin downs. This one here is holding my unstable cube, and I have an empty space here for the cube-a-majigs that I can use for drafting. And for this purpose, it works out great for me. Overall, this is a solidly made box that will protect your cards. That's what I like about it. There are a couple things I don't. The first one I'll just get out of the way, and that's the fact that this wasn't made for holding cards. It doesn't exactly cater to our needs. If that's something that's going to bother you, it's going to bother you. And I'll admit, there are some cases where it does bother me. There are some other applications I think I could use it for, maybe a battle box, depending. I can't completely say that I would use it for only cubes or only battle boxes. I'm sure there's other applications I could find for it, but it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. It does have limitations if you don't like things rattling around a little bit. Here is where we get to my suspicions on why the Stanley Dewalt is considered the better option of the two. It comes down to these compartments. You may have noticed something as I've been showing them to you. You probably can see these corners are rounded. These are rounded corners. They're chamfered, I think you would call them. And because of the size of the cards, these walls are bigger than the size of the cards. But where the chamfer is just smaller than the cards. That is why I do not recommend overfilling these. And in fact, what I have done, I actually put stacks of tokens in the ends, and I would recommend you do this if you are like me and you can only get these and you can't get the Stanleys, or if you just like this better and you want to use these compartments for putting cards in. I would recommend that you either block off the edges in some mechanical way, slide a piece of wood, glue in a piece of wood, glue in a piece of plastic, however you want to do it, or you can go the really cheap route like I did and pull out stacks of lands, tokens, some things like, cards that aren't worth anything, and just shove them in the end, so that way they take up the space. If they get pushed up against the edge like this, the tokens and the lands and whatever that you have in here are taking the brunt of it and not your cards. And that's really the only downfall to this in my mind. Everything else is easily overlookable. And I get that that's a pretty big thing. On a side note, these are fantastic for their intended purpose, holding stuff for like hardware and crap. I really like these, and I'm willing to overlook the chamfered edge issue. It's because it's $20. That's cheap. It is almost impossible to get a high quality box that will hold multiple deck boxes and/or cards in many different configurations for less than $40, let alone $20. That's not bad. Even if it's $30, it's well worth it. I would be more critical of the chamfered edge issue if this was designed for cards. I'm inherently trying to shoehorn cards into this box, so I can't begrudge that they chamfered the edges because it was just a style choice they made. Because I'm trying to shoehorn this into my hobby, I'm willing to make some sacrifices and/or modifications so that way it can fit my needs exactly. Take a negative, turn it into a positive. Is what I never say. But it's applicable here, so I'll say it. I always keep an eye out. If I'm at hardware stores or craft stores and I'm in the storage section, I always keep an eye out for things that might be able to fit my cards, because I'm always looking for ideas. Don't overlook this. Just be aware of its limitations. Another thing to be aware of is that right there. This show is part of the CIP network, inspiring creativity, one episode at a time.